Welcome to this video from the Consultants Development Institute. I'm Priscilla Watson, a presenter with CDI. This course is Strategic Planning in Organizations and is for anyone who will be involved in strategic planning, and it applies to any type of organization. The course is in 4 parts. We recommend you take them in sequence. Part 1 gives a clear and concise description of sensible strategic planning, a description that you should share with your planners as well. Part 2 gives step-by-step instructions and numerous practical tools to customize your planning process, especially to the nature and needs of your organization. Part 3 shares practical guidelines and tools to begin using that customized process to start documenting your strategic plan. This Part 4 guides you to finish your plan by specifying accountabilities and then communicating, implementing, and evaluating your plan. Each of the 4 parts and their many downloadable tools are accessible from CDI's website at consultantsdevelopmentinstitute.org. Before we start Part 4, let's do a quick review of Parts 1, 2, and 3. In Part 1, you learned about strategic planning and the critical importance of always customizing your approach to planning, including to consider your current culture, stage of development, and expertise in planning. You were acquainted with different models of planning and when to use each. You also learned that the most important parts of planning are the strategic thinking and discussions, not the strategic plan document. You were provided various tips to remember during your planning, along with a useful glossary of terms to reference. In Part 2, you established a strategic planning committee to oversee the planning process for you, including to customize it. You selected the best model of planning to use, ensured your board was appropriately involved, and made sure you would use the most useful facilitator. You ended Part 2 by ensuring your employees would be excited about the planning and eager to take part in it. As in Part 1, you came away with many useful practical tools. In Part 3, you started writing your plan by writing meaningful mission, vision, and value statements. You used a very practical approach to look outside and inside your organization, and then you analyzed the results to decide your most important strategic priorities to include in your plan. You were acquainted with a variety of other straightforward tools to decide priorities as well. Then, based on what you had decided so far, you also decided how to distinguish your organization in your industry and community by articulating your core competencies and unique value proposition. Back in Part 3, you decided your strategic priorities to include in your plan, and you have updated your vision of where you want to be. However, without accountabilities to address those priorities and achieve that vision, your plan is just a wish list. So in this Part 4, we'll equip you to develop accurate and useful action plans to achieve each of the strategic priorities that you decided during Part 3. Your action plans are useful only to the extent that your employees agree with them and will support them. In this Part 4, we'll explain how to combine your most useful planning information into a well-organized document that remains relevant and easy for you to reference. The document is taken more seriously when it's approved by the Board of Directors. We'll tell you how to get that approval. We'll also tell you how to effectively communicate the most important parts of your plan and to whom. Your strategic plan becomes real when it's being implemented. If you've been using the guidelines and tools that we shared in Parts 1, 2, and 3, then you've already made great strides towards ensuring that your plan will be implemented. In this Part 4, we'll review practical guidelines to monitor how you're doing along the way. When evaluating the status of your implementation, if you find that you've encountered obstacles or your plan is mostly obsolete, then we'll tell you how to carefully change your plan. Some quick reminders as you go through this Part 4. Don't do your planning alone. Use your strategic planning committee like you did in Parts 2 and 3. Use the customized planning process that you developed in Part 2. It suits the culture of your organization, the situation it is in, and the primary purpose of your planning. There is no perfect plan. Each plan is different for each organization, so don't worry a lot about whether you're doing it right or wrong. The planning process is far more important than the plan. It's the journey that counts, not the map. So don't feel impatient to produce your plan document. Keep referencing each of the handouts that we'll mention during this Part 4. They are available from your account in CDI's Learning Management System. Continue to document your decision in your adaptable template for documenting your strategic plan. That will result in your having a very well-developed and realistic strategic plan. So welcome to this Part 4. You've already clarified where you want your organization to be in the future and what priorities you need to address to get there. Now let's talk about how you can be sure to effectively address each priority and in the most realistic and efficient ways. Regardless of the model of strategic planning that you chose in Part 2, your model should include action planning. Action plans specify who is accountable to do which objectives and by when in order to address each strategic priority. The plan should refer to specific positions in the organization, not to specific people. Some action plans also specify what resources are needed to achieve the objectives. The action plans are what make your strategic plan realistic. When strategic plans are changed, it's rarely the mission, vision, values, and priorities. It's usually the action plans that are changed to keep the strategic plan realistic. Action plans can accomplish the strong ownership of employees in the strategic planning, because then they believe that the action plans are more relevant and realistic than the top-level statements and priorities in the plan. We'll soon share some specifics about how to develop the action plans. For now, here are some general guidelines to remember. Involve your employees in developing your action plans because they are the ones who will be implementing them. They know what's realistic. Don't aim for perfection. Action plans are unique for each organization. You can change your action plans as needed. When first developing your action plans, write down your thoughts for now. You probably have already been doing action planning, but not calling it that. Now let's look at some specifics about how to actually develop your action plans. Start by looking at each of the strategic priorities that you identified during Part 3. Pick the priority that seems the most straightforward to address for now. For example, which priority do you already understand the most or have the expertise to address? Then ask yourself, for that priority, what are 2, 3, or 4 actions or objectives that we need to do that altogether are likely to successfully address that priority? Don't think of any more objectives than that for now. Next, ask, what position in our organization should be accountable for achieving the objectives? Think about what positions are most directly involved. Ask your employees for advice. Then, estimate deadlines for each objective. To do that, ask yourself when the associated strategic priority needs to be addressed. Then work backwards to estimate deadlines for each of the objectives. You might estimate what resources are needed to achieve each objective. For example, what expertise, facilities, tools, and supplies might be needed. Identifying the objective is as important as identifying who will monitor the achievement. Again, specify a position in the organization, not a specific person. Your handout, How to Write Accurate and Useful Action Plans, will be useful now and includes a sample action plan. Now that you have developed action plans for each of your strategic priorities, it's very useful to look at all of them together to ensure they are complete and well integrated. Ask yourself the following questions about each objective. Are any objectives obviously missing? Is there any duplication across all of them? Can any of the objectives be combined? Might any objectives conflict with others? Do some seem so broad that it would be helpful to split them into more specific objectives? Now that you've verified each objective, let's see if they appear realistic. For each one, ask yourself, Do you have or can you get access to the expertise needed to achieve that objective? If not, should you extend the deadline for achieving it? Then put all of your objectives and their deadlines into one overall schedule and ask yourself, are there any deadlines around the same time? If so, should you change any of those deadlines? Now you're ready to include your action plans in your adaptable template. Your handout, How to Conduct a Reality Check of Your Action Plans, will be useful now. When you examined your action plans to be sure they were all well integrated and realistic, you probably looked at each of your strategic priorities more closely as well. So now is a good time to rank the importance of your strategic priorities to determine which ones to do first. That helps you determine your critical success factors. Those factors are the activities that are critical to undertake if other activities are to be successful. For example, a new product cannot be offered to a certain market unless the product was developed beforehand. Critical success factors can be directed to working toward the mission of the organization or to accomplishing the strategic priorities of your plan. To rank your strategic priorities, ask yourself the following questions for each. You don't have to be completely accurate for now, just make your best estimate. If we had very limited resources in time, money, and expertise, would we do this priority first? If we didn't do this priority first, then what would be the effect on the other priorities? Now you're ready to rank your strategic priorities in your adaptable template. The time span of your plan is the number of years that it would take to address the priorities in your plan. For example, you might have a 1-year, 2-year, or even a 5-year plan. Here are some guidelines to suggest the time span for your plan. Are most of your strategic priorities related to strengthening internal systems? If so, then your time span should probably be 1 or 2 years at most, because you can't achieve success over a longer time span without first strengthening those internal systems. If there are few internal issues, then your time span might be longer, for example, 3 or 5 years. Is there a rapid rate of change outside and inside your organization? If so, then that's another reason to have a shorter time span, because longer-term strategic plans might quickly become obsolete. However, if the environments are fairly stable, then you might have a longer time span here. If your board of directors or top management insists on a longer-term time span, even though conditions don't warrant it, then you might compromise by having a 3 or 5-year mission, vision, and value statements and strategic priorities, but to do your action plans for only the next year. Document your time span in the title page of your adaptable template. If you have been completing the adaptable template as you went through parts 3 and 4 so far, then you have a great start to a respectable strategic plan document. Congratulations! Now we'll complete the document by adding a financial plan and a few more pieces of information. Then we'll quickly look at the strategic plan document one more time to be sure it's complete. The financial plan in your strategic plan shows your stakeholders that you made a serious and diligent effort to develop a relevant and realistic strategic plan. It also helps to make your strategic plan real because you are much more aware of the financial resources needed to implement your strategic plan. While we usually don't recommend looking at other organizations' plans when deciding how to use your own, it is useful to look at some financial plans online, because most of them follow a similar format that you can learn from. You probably have done some form of budgeting already, so much of this will be familiar to you. First, select the time period for your financial plan. It might be only the first year of your strategic plan. Then, estimate the revenue that you expect from your products, programs, and services. Remember that new ventures rarely generate revenue quickly. Think about expected sales, investment incomes, and any other sources. Next, estimate your expected expenses. Your handout, How to Draft a Financial Plan from Your Strategic Plan, suggests many typical expenses to consider. Compute the difference between your expected revenues and expenses. If the difference is positive, then you're expecting a profit in the case of for-profits, or a surplus if you're a nonprofit. Otherwise, it's a loss or deficit. Your board of directors can approve your financial plan later on when they approve your strategic plan. As you went through parts 3 and 4, you completed much of your strategic plan document by completing the adaptable template. There are a few more pieces of information to add to the template in order to complete your plan. Fill in the information on the title page. That will include the legal name of your organization. Include the time span of your plan if you haven't done so yet. Date the version. Retain the term draft on the plan until the board of directors approves it. Then compose your executive summary, which is not the same as a table of contents. Instead, it includes the most significant highlights from your plan. For example, the primary purpose of your planning, description of your process to develop the plan, a listing of the most important strategic priorities, the benefits to your organization as the result of implementing your plan, and how your plan will be monitored. In the Associated Documents section, list the other documents that are closely related to your strategic information and its implementation, such as your operational plan if you used one, any business and program plans, etc. In Appendix B, provide a more complete description of the process that you used to develop the plan, including the model that you chose and how you customized the model. That description will give a very useful context to your plan and make its information even more meaningful to its readers. It also will be useful learning for you in the next round of strategic planning. Now you're ready to do one last quick check of your document to make sure it's complete. The handout, How to Ensure Your Strategic Plan Document is Complete, will be very useful now. The handout, How to Write Your Strategic Plan Document, provides general guidelines for writing a plan, including descriptions of each of the key components in a plan. Your strategic plan becomes official when it's been approved by your board of directors, so you should provide the draft of your plan to them soon for their review. In addition to their reviewing the contents of the plan, ask them to review it for comprehension, organization, and ease of reference. Be sure to have all of your employees review the draft as well. That goes a long way toward getting their ownership in your plan. Even if your board members readily approve the plan, make sure there is at least a brief discussion of the plan at the next board meeting. That discussion enriches the strategic information for them and helps them remember it even more. Ask your board members to vote on approving the plan. Their decision should be reflected in the written minutes of the board meeting. That verifies that the plan is official. Have each board member sign the authorization page in the adaptable template. That helps each board member to affirm to themselves and others that each supports the plan. Then you can remove the term draft from the document. Congratulations! Now you have a well-developed strategic plan document that is official. Don't underestimate the value of that accomplishment. Now you're ready to make your plan real by implementing it and checking your status along the way. If you've been following the guidelines in Part 2, 3, and 4 so far, then you've already done a lot to ensure the implementation of your plan. Let's verify what you might have already done. Ask yourself the following questions. Did you consider any learning from your past strategic planning experiences? Did you do objective assessments outside or inside your organization, or both? Or did you just go with your quick opinions? Did you continually ask yourself, is this realistic? Was your plan authorized by your board? Here are some more ideas to ensure implementation. Integrate the objectives from your action plans into performance goals for the coming year for your CEO and other key leaders. Integrate those objectives into the work plans of relevant board committees. Integrate them into various policies and procedures in the workplace. Ensure the status of implementation will be a topic on the agenda of each board meeting. Be sure that you are open to changing your plan as needed during implementation. We'll explain how to do that in a few minutes. Your handout, How to Ensure Your Strategic Plan Will Be Implemented, will be useful now. Your strategic plan includes very important information about your organization. There is great value in communicating parts of it to various groups of people who are interested in, or might be affected by, the implementation of your plan. These groups are often referred to as stakeholders. It's important to be thoughtful and systematic about what you communicate, how you communicate it, and to whom. The first task in your communications planning is to consider your groups of stakeholders: board members, employees, collaborators, suppliers, and investors. Nonprofits would also think about their general membership and any leaders in the community. Then think about what part of your strategic plan each group might be interested in. For example, board members are usually most interested in the strategic priorities and how to address each. Investors and funders are usually interested in the success of your products, programs, and services, and the profit or loss with each. They're also interested in new ideas for them as well. Each group might prefer to get its information in a different way. Employees might prefer to get the information from the board members and management. Collaborators and suppliers might prefer customized letters to each. Next, identify who will be responsible for providing information to each stakeholder and when. Put all of this information into a communications plan and include it in your strategic plan document. Then it will be implemented as your strategic plan is being implemented. The handout, How to Communicate Your Strategic Plan, will be useful to you now. Remember to document your communications plan in your adaptable template. It's hard to change the culture of an organization. They tend to want to do things the way they've always been done. So it's very important to ensure that your plan is being implemented as planned or changed if need be. There are many useful tools to monitor the status of implementation, some of which you are probably using already. The most common tool is what many people refer to as to-do lists. Each person makes a list of what has been done and what is yet to be done. The lists are sometimes shared with managers and others. Another tool is weekly status reports to managers. The reports can mention what was done, what needs to be done, and what items might need attention from the managers. Many organizations have regular staff meetings where managers share general information with their employees and hear from each employee about status and plans. Boards should always get reports from their CEOs. Different boards prefer different types of information to discuss in their board meetings. The status of implementing the plan should be a topic on the agenda of every board meeting. Plan versus actual budget reports are very efficient ways to show whether an activity might be on schedule or behind schedule. The reports show how much money was allocated for each activity and whether those funds are underspent or overspent. The handout, How to Monitor, Evaluate, and Change Your Strategic Plan, will be useful now. Now it's time to evaluate the status of the plan. Ask yourself, are we making progress toward the primary goal or purpose of our planning? Then ask, are we on schedule to addressing each of the strategic priorities? If you're making progress and are on schedule, then communicate that status and perhaps reward your employees. If not, consider the following questions. Do your employees have adequate resources such as training, money, facilities, and equipment? Should your leadership put stronger emphasis on more effective performance from employees? Is your strategic plan unrealistic about what could be accomplished? Should you change some of your deadlines? Or should you reduce some of the priorities and objectives? The handout, How to Monitor, Evaluate, and Change Your Strategic Plan, summarizes this information. During your evaluation, If you decide that your strategic plan needs to be changed, then consider using this process. First, notice when any changes might be needed. That requires that you do the monitoring and evaluating that we have talked about. Then, decide if the changes really are needed. For example, if your employees need more resources to do their jobs, or if your leadership needs better performance management, then it's not a reason to change your strategic plan. However, if the plan clearly is unrealistic, then that's a reason to change it. If changes do need to occur, then specify what needs to be changed. Is it the mission, vision, and value statements, or the strategic priorities? Or is it certain action plans? If it's the mission, vision, and value statements, then the board should authorize the changes. If it's to the action plans, then management should authorize the change. Make the changes in the plan, including the revision of your plan. Briefly describe the new version in the revision page of your plan. You might redistribute portions of your plan according to the communications plan that you had developed earlier. If you agree with this proposed process to change your plan, then include it in the adjustable template. The handout, How to Monitor, Evaluate, and Change Your Strategic Plan, summarizes this information as well. It's time to pause now to reflect on your learning so far. In your learning journal from CDI, write the answers to these questions. What are 3 of the most important learnings for you from this video? What else would you like to learn about strategic planning, and how best can you learn it? Write down the answers to those important questions in your learning journal. We have come to the end of this video. We congratulate you on completing your relevant, realistic, and flexible strategic plan. If you ever have any questions or want to share feedback with us during the courses, simply send an email to info@consultantsdevelopmentinstitute.org. And thank you again for your time during this video.